Hello and welcome to another episode of Awakened Unfiltered. I am your host, Erica Barreto, and I am so excited to introduce you all to Kimo Kepano. I am so excited to have him here today because he is going to inspire you all with the wealth of knowledge that he has, and I'm just so honored to be sitting here with him. I'm just going to let him introduce himself, his work, what he provides for the collective because he is just a wealth of knowledge. I'm just really excited to have him here.
What a lovely introduction. It's so sweet of you. Well, just so I can introduce myself to all of your listeners, aloha, my name is Kimo. For me, I do consider myself to be a seer, and I'm not sure what it was like for you when you were kind of like putting on the hat of being a practitioner. Sometimes we try on the hat of being a spiritual practitioner or a medium or a psychic or an intuitive. We kind of try on different hats to see what we feel works the best. For me, the world looks like a series of frequencies. It's actually been that way my entire life, and I've had to try to figure out how to decode the things that I can see. And when I was a kid, I just thought that my noggin was broken. But but then my parents started to record me, and we found out that the things that I was speaking about, the things that I was saying, my parents were fine if they could validate the things that I could say, because I thought that we had, imaginary friends, and why was this ghost over here? So it started off with the prediction of being a medium. And then when I grew older, I learned that I was seeing more than just spiritual energy. Then it turned into more frequency work and then dimension work. And it actually became the thing that I teach. I started to teach very, very luckily at the age of 16 in my high school. I started to teach on Saturdays. And then it just developed. It just changed and transformed. And at this point in my career, I feel so fortunate to be working with medical care teams and scientists and physicists to not only quantify the things that we can see that have always felt kind of esoteric, but to really quantify how it works for the human body, how it works for the human biome. Even if we're not experiencing a malady that is, a big hyperbolic physical thing that we're experiencing, even if it's not a malady, there are so many times where the frequency still shows a delay in the body. And when we articulate it to our clients, they'll say, well, I am having an emotional problem there. So our goal, I believe, to be able to see frequency is to kind of shut it down before it becomes malady. Now, we can also work from a malady perspective. You can shut things down once they are malady. But I believe that the value of tuning into patterns of frequency and energy is to really help direct it or redirect it. So that way, we are living our most authentic and healthy lives. And here's the awesome thing. I'm not sure if you have felt or sensed this, but there is no one who does not possess some kind of an ability. Everyone does. It doesn't matter if they are on the spectrum. It doesn't matter if they are disabled. It doesn't matter if they are going through trauma. It doesn't matter if there is a delay in emotion. It does not matter. Every human biome shows a potential for ability. They may not embrace it or understand it, but everybody does it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree enough. I have that belief as well that everybody has the ability of tuning in. It's just a sense of awareness to be able to sense and feel, and also knowing what that is and how it operates, because we all have those particular clairs, is what they would be called. But I think that we all operate from a different way in which it shows up for us. But again, we all have the ability. So I love that you said that, because some people really believe that only special people can do this type of work. And that's just not true. So I love your take on that. But you said that you saw frequencies. So when you see that around people, is it more like colors? Is it like auric field? Do you see vibrations? How does that show up for you?
Yeah, so it's all the above. So if the viewers are watching or if they're just listening, you're going to notice that I'm taking notes all the time. And I'm doing that because I'm insatiably curious, but I'm also paying attention to every single time the body shifts. So I'm nosy. So I'm going to count for a moment. 1, 2, your body has shifted 4 times already. What a nosy thing to do. But I'm always noting where the body shifts. And I do that because it looks like the body shifts right before the emotion is understood.
Yes.
And I've learned to believe the body before I believe someone's brain. And we know that our minds are fallible. We know that the body does not like to tell a lie or tell a fib. So because of that, I pay attention to every micro indicator that I can see within the body before the brain has realized it. So sometimes it does look auric, which is a series of colors. Sometimes it does look chakra, but that's more about vitality centers. Sometimes it goes outside of the auric field. It goes into more of the etheric field. Sometimes it's completely outside of the body that is kind of affecting the body. When it comes to like a frequency or an energy, they literally have patterns to them. And when I identify a pattern, it helps me identify, okay, was that an intuitive thing, or is this going to be based on some kind of trauma? Or is something happening within the human body that is going to turn into a fill in the blanks, cancer, tumor, torn ligament, dysplasia, something like that. So just learning how to decode all of the things that you can see, which I believe every seer has the potential to do, just learning how to pattern recognize. But the whole goal is to say, how can I take this huge conglomerate of puzzle pieces and try to give insight, information, and evidence to the client? So sometimes it is aura. Sometimes it's nothing else but aura. But every emotion in the body, again, has its own pattern. And here's the really fun little trick that I do. If you can take a look at every pattern in the body, if you kind of zoom out a little bit, just to be a little bit more objective, the pattern itself has a color. So then you can color code it. It doesn't look like aura. Aura looks different to me. But when I look at the vibration of an emotion and you just kind of learn to color code it, it's the easiest little mapping system to do with someone. Her gut just turned to that color. Oh, her upper rib cage is turning this color. Oh, the back of her tongue is inflamed. It's turning this color. You can identify, well, what is the emotional catalyst for why the body is showing those triggers and more. And then more than likely, you actually feel it in that vicinity.
That's a lot. That's definitely very unique. That is very unique. And I would love to hear your take on my shifting.
Are you sure?
Why not? This is a place where there's a lot of vulnerability in myself and just trying to put myself out there. Right, we're here, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear your feedback.
I promise I'm not looking for secrets. I promise I'm not looking for secrets. I won't share anything that I think would be private. So prior to our recording, I was writing a few things down, and when we hit the record button, you know, we fumbled a few times just to kind of like figure out like, how do you want to get started? I do the same thing. Sometimes I kind of get mush mouthy sometimes. How am I going to get my words out a little bit? But your left hand side of your body, this is from the very center of your crown, and it kind of like curved down to the very bottom of the throat, goes into pinks. And pinks, I have learned that pattern is a little bit like a combat color. So it'll be like, is it this or is it that? Or can I do this or should I do it like that? And the body shifted a little bit when we were starting to kind of get the ball rolling and fumble a little bit and trying to figure out how do we want to start our program. But it did that before the fumble. Mm-hmm. So then for me, just as an observer, I say, oh, something just triggered. Like, is it going to be this or am I going to be okay? Something just triggered, and then we fumbled a little bit, and then we just started over and did it again. So again, what I pay attention to is, well, what is the body showing before the thoughts actually accomplish whatever is going on?
Yeah, I love that, because the body, my thing is the body's the pendulum. The body
will speak absolutely
before we can pick it up. So that's interesting. Thank you for that. It's definitely something for me to pay attention to. But I love that you talk about patterns. And I think that when we talk about patterns, that's something that a lot of people can even take back to their childhood. Right?
Yes.
And this
yes.
is where this is where traumas and things that may have occurred will continue. I call it the backpack. We continue to hold this backpack. Sometimes it's lighter. It's like a sense of grief as well, because we carry it. Some days it's lighter, some days it's not. And some days it will trigger things within us. But I also find, and I just want to get your perspective on this, do you find that a lot of people who have experienced a multitude of trauma within their childhood do have quite more of a sensitivity when it comes to their intuitive awareness and picking up on things and energies and patterns around them?
I love that question. It's not going to be a perfect science, but here's just what we know about highly intuitive children and when there is profound trauma that happens throughout their life experience. What it does is it almost inverts intuition and it becomes hypervigilant. And when something is hyper vigilant, then they become super sensitive because they're always expecting something to go wrong. So they're more sensitive if someone walks into the room, like the facial expressions. She looks like she's not happy. So then they have a sense of anxiety and vigilance. The sound of the voice felt a little bit off. Did I do something wrong? I can feel someone walking in behind me. Am I going to be safe? Am I going to be okay? So vigilance becomes a part of a traumatic experience, which is unfortunate because then to unwind and then to relearn intuition with clarity and authenticity is more challenging. And
Yeah.
it's going to, and that's just simply because the brain is now hardwired. Now we know that the brain is plastic, so we can rewire everything, but it is going to take more time and consistency as you're growing up as a young adolescent, a young adult, and as an adult, if there was profound trauma from an intuitive perspective as a child, because now you're working through body anxiety. So that does affect that. We also know that the empathy, which is just a series of mirrored neurons that we possess, we also know that empathy, which also, by the way, has so many different patterns when you take a look at frequency with empathy. But when you take a look at empathy, instead of saying that, oh, an empath is kind and compassionate and caring, I would say that's actually not true. An empath is simply someone who possesses more mirrored neurons. And those mirrored neurons have learned to echo and perceive someone else's emotions and receive your own emotions. But the problem is when you go through trauma, sometimes you over amplify empathy too young, meaning that like now a child is the caregiver for the parent because the parent can't sustain emotions, or an older sibling doesn't know how to self-regulate. So the second child who might have more mirrored neurons is going to try to regulate for the older sibling. So that's trauma-based empathy. And again, while I say that, just because we kind of think about empath as being compassionate and kind, that's just emotions that we can learn how to do. That doesn't mean empathy. I think that we kind of gotten the definition wrong when it comes to that. But all of those things, trauma, empathy, you can induce that too young. Intuition can get delayed or blocked because of trauma in the body. So then again, the reawakening of the abilities is going to be easier for some people and harder for others. I think that's one of the reasons why so many people say, I don't think that I'm intuitive. Well, if we can unwind some of the experiences that you had as a child and then relearn and then reparent the abilities, you are intuitive. We just had a bit of a hiccup that we have to work through. And that's kind of our job as practitioners, is to foresee and perceive and then to help process and move them through that.
Yeah, that just kind of made me think about my childhood. And I remember at a time when I was developing earlier within my path, I sat there and I thought about like all the heavy emotions that I carried as a child and how at some point, yeah, I felt like a lot of what I was feeling was not just my own, it was a lot of everybody around me. And it really opened up my eyes to understanding that awareness of the energy and just picking up and being that sponge, picking up on everybody else's stuff and not knowing what was mine. Because growing up was very difficult with my emotions. I always felt like the oddball. I always felt like I didn't fit in, but I also didn't know how to manage emotions. It was just very uncomfortable for me. And growing up, you develop into your spiritual awareness, and whether you're tapping into being more psychic or wanting to be a medium, there is a path that we all have to take where we have to unwind those things because we have to work on our inner self in order to be the best channel that we could be for the spirit world and to help the people in front of us. So it's the ebbs and the flows. And I feel like it can be so difficult. I feel like a lot of the people that will be listening today who are in the midst of their development and they are going through those peaks and valleys, that they understand there is an unwinding that has to get done. But would you say that there is a better awareness as you continue to work on yourself, but there's different ways that this will show up in your life that might be a little bit triggering, maybe some situations outside of ourselves that will kind of maybe tap on that little emotion or feeling and wake it up for a little bit, but then just become aware of that? Do you think that's a thing? Do you ever think that somebody will be 100% healed?
This is a great question. This also, my answer really is based on what I've learned. in terms of offering healings and insight and more. I did start to offer healings when I was young, when I was in high school, and I got very disheartened by it because I could not figure out when I was younger why, when you would work on shifting someone's emotions, why it came back in 3 days. I could not figure out why I would get sick when I was around certain individuals who were also sick. I could not figure out why. So I kind of tried to shut that part of the abilities down for a very long time. It wasn't until I was older that I realized that when you are in service to offering insight and healing for somebody, our goal, at least I believe in my pedagogy, my belief is to help offer insight on where the genesis was. We figure out how to heal the genesis, heal the current reality simultaneously, and understand that it will never ever actually be gone. It's not supposed to be gone. It's supposed to be worked with like a duet. So that way you'll feel great for 3 years, but then one day someone says something or you go through a fearful experience and it gets triggered again. But our goal is to become so adept at handling what the trauma was that when it returns, we quickly know how to reassess and re-regulate. So your entire life will be a series of duets of traumas. There's no such thing as a perfect vessel. I think that that is something that the woo-woo community would like you to believe, but that's not actually how the human brain and the human body is wired. It's not supposed to be like that. We're just supposed to be skilled at handling it. So that way our trauma is our own responsibility. That way your trauma as a mother is not your child's responsibility. That way your trauma is not your partner's responsibility. Your trauma is your responsibility. Did I answer that question? I don't know if I answered that
No, you
question.
did. You did. And I love that you said duet because I think there could be a lot of misinformation online and it could be very confusing for somebody who is stepping into their path, or maybe they're starting their healing and they hear somebody say, I'm healed, I'm 100% healed, and I don't have to deal with this. And I think it's so important just to give that wisdom and impart that on people, to let them know, like, there's nothing wrong with you if you find yourself revisiting these emotions and feeling the feelings. And I think that most times people are shamed for that. And I think that there's an importance of feeling our feelings. And I know that you do a lot of work as well with the nervous system, which is a
Yeah.
very big part of, the healing, but also that connected awareness to our intuitive abilities. And I would love for maybe for somebody out there that's listening and they're like, well, I'm a mess, I'm emotional, I don't know where to start, where do I go? How would you impart some knowledge on them to give them maybe a baby step on where they could start today if there was something that you could open up their mind to?
First of all, I love mess. When someone comes in and they're like completely dysregulated and highly, highly anxious, I love mess because I love, and this is just part of my fastidious brain, but I love to see messy things get organized. I love hoarder shows. I just love to see messy things get organized. So when I'm meeting with a client and they show up and I can sense that there's so many different kinds of things going on around the nervous system and the body and traumas and more, the very first thing that we do is we start compartmentalizing what kinds of trauma. Because trauma, when it's perceived for so long, feels like objective trauma. It feels like for the recipient, I just can't see how to process this. I can't see how to move through. Well, my whole entire life has been effed up. Well, I've never, and nothing has ever gone right. It will feel that way. But what we really don't understand is that possibly 3 or 4 things are just taking up all the bandwidth. So what we do is we compartmentalize to look at those 3 or 4 things or however many traumas are perceived. And then we work on them compartmentally because trauma itself has multiple languages. The trauma of an SA is not the same thing as the trauma of being abandoned. They might have a similar chord, but they're not the same. So I don't believe as a practitioner that I should be using the same language for them because they're not the actual same thing. And you'll find that little by little or lot by lot, the anxiety levels begin to decrease because they're learning specific language for every single trauma. What we have found as we're working through these trauma delays, more than likely prolonged chronic traumas go into the autoimmunes. Now, not always the autoimmunes, but predominantly the autoimmunes. It does get a little strange when you have a child who has an autoimmune or they're born with an autoimmune. Those appear to be different in terms of emotional frequencies, but for the most part, as adults, our chronic traumas will turn into an autoimmune. So then we have to look at what kind of autoimmune. And you'll start to find that certain traumas connect to certain kinds of autoimmunes, which will blow your mind. And I think I'm going off on a tangent.
No, you're not. You're not. Because you're literally like, this is like the story of my life. This is the story of my life. I have an autoimmune, but I think that that was just a lot. It's relatable to my trauma, and I'm always going through it. And I just feel like it's so important. And no, you're not going on a tangent. I feel like you're really just going with the flow and speaking what needs to be heard for the listeners out there, because there's so many people that are going through this right now. I think it's so important for them to just realize and understand the process of what happens, and just knowing that, yeah, you know, it's a part of who we are. And I think it really is a part of our evolution of our soul that's here on this earth, to really learn the many different ways of how we move to the next step, the next chapter is what I feel. It's a lot. It's a lot to unpack. And there really is not just one answer. I think that you could really dive really deep into this. I just felt like it was just something we needed to talk about. And I love hearing it from you because of the work that you specifically do. You do so much for humanity with your videos, and just
Erica, you're so sweet.
the way that you, it's just very inspiring to hear others who are trying to teach people from a very grounded space. And I think that's what's needed.
I really appreciate that. Let me give you an example of how you can take a look at trauma and how you can process it. So let's take a look at cancer for a moment. So I do work with multiple cancer clients, and it's helpful for people who are novice, who people who may not have cancer. It's helpful for us to know from the very beginning that we all have cancer cells. All of us have them. It just depends on what turns them into malignant after being benign, because we have benign cancer cells for the most part. So then what we have to do is we have to say, well, if the cancer is not induced because of environmental toxins or things like that, why was it triggered? So we now can quantify that if it's not because of pollutants and toxins and more, that cancer itself is an emotional trigger. So then we have to say, but what kind of emotional trigger for what kind of cancer? And here is something that we have learned over the course of doing cancer work. When I'm meeting with a client and I'm helping them work through a trauma, and the very first thing that they say is, well, I'm here to meet with you because I have cancer. And I say, okay, would you like me to scan the body first, or do you want us to kind of just jump in? If a female says, I want to just jump in, I have breast cancer, I will already know that there is going to be an issue on the maternal line. Breast cancer always has an issue on the maternal line. We've never not had an issue with the maternal line when you're working with a cancer client that has breast cancer. Now, is it possible that I could ever have a client who has breast cancer that doesn't have an issue on the maternal line? Sure, I've never had it. When I cross-reference that information, when I'm working with doctors and medical care teams and they've asked me to come in and I'm cross-referencing information with a breast cancer client, well, I do have problems with my mom. Or my mom had problems with her mom. There is always a problem on the maternal line. Same rules apply with testicular cancer, colonic cancer. If you can compartmentalize how the emotions are not excised through the body, literally understood how to process and release, then it is going to metastasize in different parts of the body. And problems on the maternal line literally go to the breast tissue. It's helpful for us to know that. So our goal, if we were working to heal breast cancer, is yes, you work with your medical care teams and you take all their information, but we know that the cells were triggered because of an emotion. So what is our job? You have to reshape the emotion around what that trigger is. So that way you're getting two different kinds of therapy. You're getting whatever the doctor recognizes, you know, if that's radiation or chemotherapy, then you're getting chemotherapy. But you have to figure out how to identify with specificity and then create change to that trauma. And you can.
That's a lot. Yeah. I'm just listening to what you're saying. And I just, something kind of like, whoop, it kind of like brought my attention to somewhere because you said with the maternal line, this is something that we can see in a female. But then you also explained with the male on that side.
Men can get cancer in the chest, right? But when there's paternal traumas are a little bit different in the biology of a male body. I do not mean gender. I just mean the biology of
Okay.
a male body.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah. So for example, when a biological male body has testicles, if there's trauma on the paternal line, that's a little bit different. That will usually go somewhere in between the testicles and the colon. So it could be either of those or something going on underneath there, like some kind of tumor building up in the perineum or something like that. So again, you just learned to cross reference all the information that you can see within the body, and then you ask the emotion.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm just going to tell you why, right? I that
Mhm.
that thought just kind of dawned on me because I recently had the biggest health scare of my life. I guess you could say it's the awareness inside that I knew something. I knew something was wrong with me, and
Mm.
I kept hearing, check your stomach, check your stomach. So I was like, I'm just going to go do it. I'm just going to go check my stomach. And I am somebody who grew up with trauma from both sides. And I did get diagnosed with a precancerous polyp, which had I waited 2, 3 more years, it would have been a different story. So I feel like growing up, my trauma did come from both sides, but a lot of it had to do with my father, which for me makes me feel like, oh my goodness, light bulb just went off where that's a possibility of where I hold a lot of that trauma in that sacral. I mean, I don't know how you would correlate the two if that has anything to do with
No,
the
you're
energy.
doing great. You're doing really, really well. So because we're in the biology of a female body, what we say is if there's issue on the paternal line, it will go in the same generalized area. Now, again, it's not a perfect science because then we have to quantify, well, for example, why am I having a polyp on the right side versus the left side? Or is it polyps in both areas? Or am I now in queue to get a hysterectomy? We have to take a look at it specifically, but we're talking about generalizations right now. So those are always the first questions that I ask. And if for some reason the person says, "Well, I know that I don't have any trauma on that line," then we say, "Well, what about your mother? What about your father?"
Mm.
Oh, my mom definitely had. Well, exactly. Why? Because things are not only epigenetic, being passed down the genetic line, but we know that things are also morphogenetic, which means that your body could or could not have pushed the button, but it did. So we have to figure out why did it? Did my body push it because I saw my mom push it? Well, she had breast cancer, so I had breast cancer. You know what I mean? So we just have to figure out what the pattern is in terms of how it shows up as an under-processed emotion.
My mind is like, I have chills right now.
Here's the general rule, Erica, that I teach novice individuals who are just kind of coming into this information. We already know, we can quantify that the brain and the subconscious mind are vast machines, right? The subconscious mind has hundreds and thousands of stories that it tells itself. The body, however, because the body does not lie, the body will tell us which of the stories it's still living, which of the stories it has not processed yet, which are the stories that you said, I'm going to deal with that later, which are the stories that your mind has said, I'm not going to focus on that, which are the stories that you haven't done yet. Because the body will always tell us. So our goal is to recognize what is the under processed traumas that haven't been excised yet. And that helps us get to the end, helps us get to the healing faster.
That's so amazing. I know so many people are gonna be so grateful to hear
I hope
that.
so.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I always feel like these conversations they flow so like effortlessly. We didn't really have a plan on what we were going to talk about. There was just some things, but I feel like it's just a beautiful conversation and just very educational as well. You are such a great educator. Just overall, you can just provide for the people that you help. Is there anything that you want to add? Anything that you want to talk
Yes,
about that we
there
haven't
is.
touched on? Yeah.
I want to, can I pull a cord with you for a moment?
Yes, of course. Pull
I
them.
want to talk
Pull
about two things, right? And I promise I won't speak secrets. or privacy. But there's two things I want to talk about. When we take a look at just intuition itself, though we can kind of identify how we experience intuition, well, everyone experiences intuition a little bit differently. When you look at the clairs, and for individuals who are neophytes, just, our clarity of, and then you identify the sense, sight, the clarity of knowing, the clarity of smell, the clarity of taste. When you identify what the clarity or the clair is, we have learned through basic psychism that there's approximately 5 different clairs. But here's the part that I think gets under noticed. Every one of those clairs, from voyance to cognition to aliens and gusence and sentience, every one of those clairs actually has a visual frequency. They all look like something. So when you're meeting with the brand new client, if you were to put on your seer goggles, you will be able to see the alignment of where their intuitions are, meaning what is in high dominance, what is growing, what might be locked, what might be blocked, what might be dormant. You can see what that alignment is. Now, to go even further, if you just keep your seership goggles on and say, well, each of these has their own vibration, their own look, are there any other vibrations outside of the conventional 5? And there are. There are so many more frequencies out there than the conventional 5, but they're not taught that way. And what I've learned by vetting schools all around the world is they're not taught because they're only being taught by psychics. They're not being taught by seers. More Aboriginal native practices, they do have an awareness of more, but there is a doctor in London, Dr. Tara Swart, who has been able to help quantify scientifically that there's approximately 30. Now, are there 30 frequencies that I have been able to see in terms of intuition? I'm close, not quite there yet, but we are close, which means that sometimes they'll say, oh, I have this ability, without realizing that this very specific ability that you think you're practicing actually itself has 6 different abilities within it. So I think that the fun part of learning psychism is to say, great, now that I finished 101, can I advance to more intermediate work? Can I advance to more advanced work? And it kind of scratches that itch of wanting to learn. I think it's incredibly exciting. Sometimes I get asked by different psychic schools, well, what's the value of needing to do that? And here's how I describe it. When we're learning about our abilities, I think about it like a radio signal, or maybe turning on your stereo system. If I were to turn on my treble and my bass and my grandmaster all at the same time and then hit play, when the music comes on, everything is distorted. I've got to actually toggle my switches. I've got to reshift the balance, change the treble, change the volumes, so that way we can perceive easily. And when it comes to looking at all of the different intuitions, sometimes one ability is not as in tune as another. So if you learn how to take a look at all the different intuitions, you can say, okay, I'm not getting a profound enough read. Let me just kind of amplify this one. Let me switch this one. Let me add a little bit of that. That to me has high value, which means, because we've got good days and bad days as intuitives, what it means is that you will never have a bad day. There's days that you will underperform on these two, so then you have to amplify and overperform on the other ones. When I'm in session 5 days a week, I don't ever want to have a bad day. And you know that our bodies are not wired every single day to perceive in the same way. So by toggling your switches, you will always be able to perform in high yielding results. So bookmark, put a tab on that one, because I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about 2 things with you. May I?
Yes, of course.
I already know that one of your top performing abilities is audience. I already know that it is, just because of the vibration. But here's the thing that I want to talk about. So in case people are curious, audience itself looks like a horseshoe to me. It literally looks like this little half ring that kind of goes from your trapezius to your trapezius. It's not a circle, it's not oblong, but it literally kind of moves like this. And contingent on how large of an audience I'm speaking to will show how much it pulses. You're more audience on your right-hand side. Now, At first, when we hear that, we're like, well, what does that even mean? I do hear insight. I do hear my information. I can hear the words between the words of someone that I'm talking to, but why is it mostly on the right? Though you'll perceive it through your knowing, it'll feel very cognitive, but technically it's a hearing. If you were to exercise this side just a little bit more, then it'll be more balanced. I know that the reason why this side hears more is that there's a trauma. This side has been traumatized. And
Mhm.
if you just use the brain, if we take a look at, more creative side right and the more logical side left, you could pull that cord. You could also pull the cord on right and left side of the body. Right side has a tendency to hold on to more like immediate information. Left side has a tendency to hold on to old traumas. And because your left side to me shows a little bit of a drop of a delay, I know that there's an old trauma there, that delayed audience. But it's interesting because audience is actually quite a high ability for you. So I think that you have moments where it's wild and moments where it feels like I don't get anything from this one.
Yeah, there'll definitely be times. This is where I had my brain surgery,
Oh,
and there's a little
really?
joke about that.
Oh,
That we
interesting.
say
Yeah.
that after I had my brain surgery, it kind of like amplified my abilities even that much more, because I've always been very sensitive since I was a child. I've just had very profound experiences, but life, work, I never really paid mind to it. And then all of a sudden, after I had my brain surgery, I ended up leaving work. I had to retire from law enforcement here in New York. And it was traumatizing all the way around. I mean, from losing my career to not knowing what was going to happen for the rest of my life, to dealing with a new normal, is what I call it, because I just have difficulties that I face now with health because of my new normal and having
Yeah.
the brain surgery. But yeah, that's the trauma I've had on this side. Now I'm going to have to see what possibly, and I'm going to work on that with my spirit guides.
Hear how that goes. When I say that there's trauma that is prolonged, if you think about it from just an intuitive perspective, not even from a malady perspective, more than likely it showed up young, meaning that I was aware that I was hearing the things that my friend wasn't saying. I was aware that I was hearing insight coming through. But then when it gets negated because of an adult telling you knock it off, or you feel silly. So then when we negate the ability, but the ability is high, it doesn't know where to go. Right. Or sometimes the trauma is induced because you had profound insight and you didn't say anything about it and something bad happened. So there's different ways that it manifests for us. But I would say that one of the things that you can do to amplify more of a balance on this side is, and you can do this with your guides, but literally try to find a technique that shares the bandwidth of a potential ability, literally evens it out. And you can be tactile with it. You can sit in meditation with it. You can do exercises for that. But I would love to just kind of challenge that trauma just to see what would happen when I understand it from a different perspective, when I can um, maybe just kind of gain more insight from what it's trying to tell me. And if it is because it is now malady induced, then we just need to take a look at it from, well, what was the emotional catalyst for the malady?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's kind of how I teach it, like a radio station with the
Yeah.
frequencies and tuning in, because sometimes if we aren't reliant on one, we switch to the other clair. So that's something. And I would say that my next one would be, it toggles between claircognizance and then I have the clairvoyance, because it all kind of lights up like a Christmas tree. But I like the visual of the horseshoe. Even though you said you see it like that, I'm very visual. So even utilizing that, almost looking like a set of headphones to
Yeah,
even out the frequency, I think that would help, visualizing that and just kind of energetically tuning that clair up. So that is
absolutely.
interesting. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course, of course. Has that sparked other questions for you?
I feel like just within myself and just listening to that, I think it'll be helpful for other people to even understand their own clairs, to really try to figure out and, like you said, amplify them, because there is so much more. And I've always felt that, like I felt that we're taught to just operate on these specific clairs that we have. There's so many different experiences. I've always had a problem putting myself into this label. And I think a lot of people I work with have that problem as well. Like, I'm a medium, but I'm also these things. And that's what I'm being kind of challenged with right now, because yeah, I've been trained to be a medium. It's the first thing that I step into, but I'm all these things. Like, I have all these different abilities. I've always had a problem trying to fit that in, and it just doesn't fit in a box. It's just very wide, and it's just, for me, it's just flowy. Even though we all have the ability to do this, my grandmother was very, very sensitive, both sides. Just thinking about that and how, I guess, the connection on family members, it's almost ancestral, is kind of what I feel. And that's kind of where I've been in my own journey, just tapping into the ancestral part of my practice. I know that you also talk about like interpreting soul patterns in life themes, and I think that kind of ties into that. Would you say so or no?
I think
How do
that
you
it
get
does
that?
in some ways. I think that it's really healthy for us when we're learning about energy work to know that there are major differences between spirit energy and soul energy. And I know that a lot of people will use that those two words interchangeably, but to me they're not interchangeable because they're not the same thing. Right now we are in physical, visceral bodies that have spiritual intelligence. When we cross over on the other side, there will be an aspect of Erica on the other side that feels like an aspect of Erica here. That is spiritual information, but that's not soul information. Spirit information for me, and the way that it looks on a frequency level, your spirit is an aspect of your soul energy, which is how we can begin to quantify information that feels like, well, that's not a part of this life. I feel that in a different life, or I feel that in a past life. But how are they all connected? Well, they're all aspects of Erica's soul. Erica has a connection to that soul. And I think that when we take a look at what those soul and spirit journeys are, I think that one of the healthy goals is to say, where does my spirit journey connect to my soul journey? Like when you're driving on the Long Island Expressway, are you going towards Manhattan? Or are you going to go towards Brooklyn? Are you going to go towards Long Island? Well, there's a whole bunch of different ways that I can veer off. I'm going to veer off to the Vanderwick, or am I going to go this way? Well, you're still going in a direction, but where are you going? I think about it as, if my goal is to go from Long Island to Manhattan, Manhattan being the soul, which way am I going to go? So I think that one of the things that helps us identify how to not get lost in the sauce is, my spirit right now is having a really hard time. And I've had all these past life regressions from different people who have said, I've always had a hardship there. Okay, so then how are we going to gain the insight from what our soul is trying to instill upon us? Did it go generationally? Is it a mistake that I keep on making right now? How can I make course corrections so the lessons that I'm learning now are in the same alignment towards the lessons that my soul actually wanted me to learn?
Yeah, that definitely touches. That's something I even received in meditation, just trying to understand the soul lessons. And I think, again, there's just so many takes on that, but I feel like I have a better understanding of that now with the things that I have been through. So it has just been very eye-opening, but also has me always questioning. I never look at, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? I don't do that anymore. I'm more of a, okay, well, where's this taking me? And what can I
Yeah,
learn from this? And I think
good,
that's the
good.
perspective that I have really shifted in my life, that has been extremely helpful, so that I don't feel like I'm continuously in this loop of patterns. My thing is always stepping into something new that feels super uncomfortable, that feels like I've never and would never in a million years do it. I'm just like, I'm doing it. So that's where
Good.
I'm at in my journey and my life. I saw one of your videos pop up. I was actually on TikTok and I was just like scrolling, and I saw one of your
Yay.
videos pop up. And it was such an interesting conversation. And I think it's one that a lot of people could learn, and even our listeners, about the echoes of energy, and
Mm,
how sometimes, especially in the mediumship world, right? I
mhm.
mean, we could talk about this forever when it comes to different experiences that people have. But I loved your take on the aspect of the stuck spirit, the
Mm.
And that's just something we hear so much. And I think it's just so harmful for the people that we are trying to help. I mean, I couldn't imagine reading for somebody and telling them that their loved one was stuck. Like, it's never happened for me. As many readings as I've done, volunteer work for missing persons with a organization, people pass away many different ways. And I think that it's such an important conversation to have when it comes to that. And I just really loved what you had to say about that, because I think it makes sense. It makes sense. And I think it has a lot to do with training. It has a lot to do with the education, and also not including the bias that we were brought up on. And I just would love for you to share what you had in that video, because I think it, especially for a lot of developing mediums out there who, are afraid, or they don't understand, or maybe they're looking for the right education and they just don't know. So I would love to hear your take.
Thank you. What I'm going to say, mediums are either going to love it or hate it. I get a lot of hate mail, and I call it fan mail, but a lot of my hate mail is either from very specific dogma or it's from bad mediums.
Mhm.
And the reason why I know that it's going to be challenging for certain mediums to hear is that it's going to challenge their practice. And no one wants to be told that they're wrong. So I'm not going to use the language of wrong or right. I'll just use the language of what I think is high yielding versus low yielding results. I truly believe that there are many mediums out there who would do better if they learned how the brain works. To actually study the brain, because what we don't understand, because our brain is so highly influential because of our religious background, because of our cultural background and more, that when you're now learning how to attune to spirit, your perception might see a spirit feeling stuck. Your perception might feel like there is something attached to somebody. But then what we have to also understand is, well, why does my brain perceive it in that way? Even though I'm a medium, even though I can see it, why does my brain perceive it that way? And we have to decode why your brain perceives it in that way. We don't understand that your brain only has a certain amount of vocabulary. And if the vocabulary that you were taught is dogmatically that spirits can get stuck and purgatory is real and hell is real, then you're literally going to see versions of spiritual intelligence come in that way. Now, to me as a consumer, that doesn't feel helpful. That feels like it's the antithesis of being helpful, because now I'm concerned. Now I'm afraid. Now I feel worried that they haven't crossed over, simply because that person's vocabulary was not adept enough to understand a true neutral brain. Now, when I'm in session with people, I have to know the differences between my avatar and Kimo. Right now I'm speaking as Kimo and I'm gently tuning into my avatar. But my avatar on social media when I'm in session is the light seer. And I know when he's speaking and I know when Kimo is speaking. I have an opinion as Kimo. My opinion as Kimo is that mediums need to do a lot more work. But when I'm tuned into my avatar, my brainwave literally goes to neutrality. I have a brain device that I can put onto my head that I will literally test my brain waves before I go into a session to see where my brain waves are at. And if my brain waves are pushing too much beta, I've got to reshape my brain before I even consider going into a session. There are mediums on TV that have programs out there that I think are terrible mediums. Awful mediums when it comes to using their own dogma. There are mediums on TV that I think are highly talented because their brain is neutral. You can perceive information on their side without scaring the living crap out of somebody. And again, this is why many mediums get challenged with me, because you challenge their experience. But I do see that. But I did hear that. But I do feel like a spirit is stuck. Okay, great. Well, that tells me the level of development you have had when it comes to neutralizing your brainwaves. And if you simply cannot understand that there is a potential that you could be wrong because your brain still has a foot in the door, then we're not the same kind of practitioner. And that's okay. This is actually why I tell people, vet your practitioner before you join. The problem is with practitioners like you and I, is that what gets the most attention is fear-based mediumship.
Yeah, I
That
couldn't
gets
agree that.
Right. They,
Yes.
they get the most attention. So if you read the comments from people who are doing fear-based mediumship or fear-based paranormal shows, when you read the comments, watch, everyone's going to say, that's right. Oh, the fear of God. Oh my gosh. And that's a demon. Everyone is going to be in agreement because that's what it is taught. So I believe in order to get the purest of information that is of insight and of assistance, we have the responsibility to reshape our brain. So it doesn't have any foot in the door of what you want to say in terms of helping them shift and grow and feel a sense of change for the client. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure which video you watched, but it's probably about that.
it is. No, and that's exactly what it's about. And I just love that, and I think that mediumship, any type of spiritual work should be coming from a neutral stance because we shouldn't be including our own bias, our own stories into somebody else's healing and work that we're trying to help them with. And I think that what we are trying to do for the client is to leave them in a space where they can help themselves, where they can feel like they left with something that they can think about and even try to figure out how they can communicate with their loved ones themselves because they can do it too. But I feel like the fear based spirituality gets so much attention and it's horrible. And I hate that for people, because you're putting themselves in a space to really believe that. But again, it's their belief. I think it's their journey to figure out and unfold. I say that without judgment, but at the end of the day, I think as mediums, there definitely needs to be development on their part where they do get to that place of neutrality to help the people that are coming to us for the communication, the healing. It's so important. I'm so passionate about it. We could talk for
Yeah.
hours about
Yeah.
this because I am so passionate about the spirit world. I love the spirit world and the work that we do because it embodies love. And I think that when people aren't coming from that compassionate space and love, that you're missing the mark. You're missing what this is all about. And I really loved that take. And you're so fearless. You're so fearless. You get the fan mail. I mean, but that's what you have to expect in this line of work when you're showing up online and you're showing up in this social media platform. You have to expect that you're going to have people disagree.
I love disagreement, and I actually love skeptics. I do. I love skeptics because a skeptical person says, "Well, I just don't know. Maybe not." So when it comes to working with a skeptic, then it becomes my job to say, "Well, let me provide as much information that is validatable and evidential as possible, so that way you can make up your mind." Right? So I don't mind that. And let me just kind of tie the bow in that conversation. If there are mediums, new novice mediums who are listening to this, who are saying, well, then what is it then? What is it? If I see it and there is a sense of evil and there's a sense of hardship and problems going on in the body, if I can sense it, then what is it? I get that a lot. Then tell me what it is. Well, we have to identify that when we are speaking to spirit information, again, has a connection to the other side, but had a connection to a physical body, we will get insight of former personality traits. We will have insight of someone's father who was very rapacious as a human being. We'll get that. But a skilled medium is able to say, now that I've got the echo of who we're talking to, that sounds like we're talking to your dad, great. Then it's the medium's job to make sure that they then now only bring in clarity of information. A non-trained or an underdeveloped medium will stay in that echo. They'll say, yeah, because dad was a big old jerk and he's really angry right now and he's doing this with his arms and he doesn't want you to do this. Well, unfortunately, your medium has not grown how to gain insight and transform. They haven't gained that information yet. They don't know how to do it yet, which is why I say vet them. Vet your practitioners, look at their results, read their testimonials, look at how they speak, try to make your decisions based on that.
Yeah, I think that's super important and definitely there to educate the people on how to find those readers out there that are in alignment with them, but also are not going to leave you in a very harmful space. And I think that's so
Right.
important. We are coming to an end, but I would love for you, Kimo, to share where our listeners can find you. What are some programs and things that you offer to help people, whether it be with their healing, their intuition, whatever it is. Please
All the
share.
above. You can definitely find me on social media on TikTok as The Lightseer, on Instagram as Aloha Lightseer. I think we are also on Facebook and Pinterest and Lemonade. We're on all the platforms. But if you want to get really quick information, just go to my website, thelightseer.com. It has a whole bunch of information on private sessions. I also offer courses. I have seminars that I teach twice a month. I have a whole membership series that you can join where you have a library of pre-recorded meditations, and that library is always evolving. Every month we add new meditations. We have new seminars. In fact, this month's seminar is this Friday about psychic attacks and what does that actually mean and how to transform that. So I suggest going on to the website if you want to know as much information as possible. It'll connect you to all those details.
Yes, and we'll have all those links below if you're watching on YouTube or if you are listening in. All the links will be below so you can find Kimo on all his platforms and everything that he has to offer. So I just want to thank you, Kimo, for joining me today, for imparting your knowledge. You are just a wealth of it, and I am just so honored to have you here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica. I appreciate that.
Till next time, guys.